In this video, I'm going to show you how to create your first ElectroServer 5 plugin. We're going to write it using Java. It's going to be really easy. And the goals of this plugin are just to allow a client to create a room and have this plugin scope to that room. So it'll be a room level plugin. And the client will send a request to the plugin. So our plugin wants to capture this request, look at the object on the request, and then send a response back to the client. I'll show you the code that goes into writing one of these, and then we'll look at a client that's used to test this, but we're not going to look at the client code all that deeply in this video. And once the plugin is written, we'll compile it, we'll bundle it into an extension, and we'll install it with ElectroServer before we do the test. Alright, so I have NetBeans open here. I'm going to create a new project. File, new project, Java class library. And I'm going to call this Hello World extension. And I'm going to put it in a location that I created for this extension. Hello World example is what I called it. And I click finish. Alright, so now that that we've created a new project, we need to give it access to the ElectroServer 5 server-side API. So I need to include the jar for that, or the jars for that. I'll right-click on this and choose Properties, and click on Libraries, and then add jar/folder. And I just browse to the ElectroServer 5 installation directory. I have 5.0.1 installed. I go in the server directory, in lib, and for this example, we need the ElectroServer 5 jar, and we're going to be debugging, or we're going to be logging at least one thing to the console, so we'll need to include a jar for the logger as well. slf4j-api-1.4.3.jar. So I select both of those and click Open. And OK. Now that we have access to the API, let's create our plugin class. So I just right-click, New Java class, and I'm going to call it Main. So now we have a completely blank class open. In order for this to be a plugin, it needs to extend the base plugin class. So extends base plugin. And I'm going to let NetBeans do an auto import for me. So the base plugin class implements all of the different event handlers that are possible for a plugin to gain access to. So in order for us to have them in here, we just override the ones that we need. Some example event handlers are init, which is called when the plugin is initialized, request, which is called whenever a client sends a request to the plugin, and there's user enter, user exit, and there's more. So today we're just worried about the request event handler. So let's override that. Override public void request, and it takes two parameters. The first is a string, it's the player name. The second is ESObject read only, and we'll call that request ob. If you don't know what an ESObject is, you should read about that on our site, and I'll use an annotation in this video to tell you where that is. But basically, it's a strictly typed, or it's an object that contains strictly typed parameters that are serialized when sent over the wire. So an ESObject can contain a deep data structure, and it's just automatically serialized and deserialized on both ends. So it's something we use all over the server, and it's used by plugins a lot. So now that we have this generic stubbed out request method here, let's log that the request was called. So get API gives us access to the API layer, and then get logger gives us access to the logger, and then debug allows us to just debug something. So we'll say player name plus sent request. All right, so let's respond to the user if they sent something that we wanted them to send. So if request ob dot get string, we're getting a string off of this object, action, which is one we'll send from the client, dot equals, let's say request hello. So if the client sends a property called action with a value of request hello, then we'll respond with hello. So let's call get API dot send plugin message to user. So we'll type player name here, and then we'll call it send ob. So we have to create the object to send to the user. ES object we'll create a send object. We'll create a ES object called send ob, and we'll just put a little bit of information on it. So send ob dot set string action request sent, or we'll say hello sent, and then send ob dot set string message, and we'll just type the word hello here. And I have a typo right here. This should be string. Okay, so I see two other quick little typos here. I need a semicolon and I need an E right there. Okay, so this when a client sends a request to the plugin, this event handler is called. The player name is passed in. The request object is passed in, and then if they sent a certain variable that we're looking for, we create a new ES object and put some properties on it, and we send it back to the client. We send it back to the client using this line here, get API.send plugin message to user, and specify the user's name and the object. So that's the plugin. So now we just need to compile this, bundle it into an extension, install it with ElectroServer. So I'm going to right click on the project and choose build. Okay, build successful. So let me go to that folder, go into here and into the dist directory. You can see that there is a hello world extension jar file. I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to go into the ElectroServer installation directory. And in here, go into the server folder and into extensions, and I'm going to create a new extension for this. I'm going to call it Hello World Extension. This is us installing the extension. So I created a folder for it, and now I went in there, I create a lib folder, lib, and in there I'm going to put the jar. So now back out here, I need to create an extension.xml file. I'm just going to copy one from another extension here and put it in there, and we'll just modify it. Okay, so we need to give it a name. We'll call it Hello World Extension. This is the name of the extension, and we need to give the plugin a name, Hello World, and it's written in Java, and then a path to the class, which we just called main. Okay, now that I've saved that, we can start up ElectroServer. Okay, so ElectroServer is now started. I'm going to flip into my Unity project here and test to see if this worked. Okay, here in Unity, I'm just going to click play to test the application. It's a code-only application, so there's nothing really to look at. We'll just look at the console down here. So play. I can see that I connected, joined a room. I've received a plugin message event. And so let's look over here at the ElectroServer console. Let's see here. Okay, so my username is guest, and so you could see here that our plugin logged that guest sent request right here. Guest sent request, and guest happens to be my username. And back here in our plugin, that's what we decided to log out. Player name plus sent request. So my name was guest, and but was the request actually received by the client? Yes, it was. Over here in Unity, we can see that we received something from the plugin saying hello sent, and then the message on that was hello. Okay, so that was the first plugin. I will just quickly go through some of the client code that we use to connect here, but that's really it for this video as far as creating the plugin. Now for just a minute or so, I'm going to show you some of the client code. So if you were familiar with some of the previous videos that we did on how to connect to Unity and how to join a room, things like that, I just modified that code a little bit. So I'll show you here that up here where I have added some event listeners, so we get events whenever, so we gain access to the events that happen. I added one for plugin message event. So whenever a plugin message event comes to the client, we call the on plugin message event handler, which is right here. So if this client receives a plugin message event, I just log that the message event was received, and then I log out the value of the action parameter, and I log out the value of the message parameter. And action and message are just things I made up for this plugin. There's nothing special about those names. It's just what we're using. So how did we tell the room to create the plugin in the first place? Well, let's come down here. In the previous videos, this code here did not exist. It was just when we created a room, we created a new room request, gave it a room name and zone name, and then we sent that request. Well, when you want to associate a plugin with the room, you create a new instance of a plugin list entry object, and you tell it which extension to use, which plugin handle to use. Both of those are defined in the extension XML file. And then you give it a new name. So the instance of this plugin, what name do you want to call it by in this room? I usually just give it the same name as the plugin handle. And then you add that plugin list request to a list of plugins, and then you add that to the list to the create room request, and you send it. So you can tell the server to create many plugins and associate it with this room. In practice, you usually only really need to create one. So once the room has been created, you get the join room event, and then I call a function I wrote called test send plugin request. And in this plugin request, I create in this method I create a new plugin request object, tell it which room the plugin is in, so the room ID and the zone ID, and I create a new ES object to send to the plugin, and that's plugin request.parameters, and I set a string on it, action request hello, and I tell it the name of the plugin to target in the room, hello world, and then we send it. So that's it for this video.